Hello, and welcome to the sixth episode of the Spiritual Language Teacher podcast. My name is Anne-Sophie, and I am the Spiritual Language Teacher. Today, the theme of the podcast is light and shadow. Yes, pretty much a walk in the park, but with some powerful analogies, an artwork, and a children's book, as well as life-altering home-based practices. By the end of this podcast, we will have an understanding of what facing your shadow means and the crucial element not to live ourselves living a life of licking wounds. We will also explore what evil is, no big deal, right? What the difference is with shadow and how, yes, finishing your plate can affect world hunger. Did I pique your interest? My intent is to jumpstart your curiosity to nurture the wisdom of the heart of your child archetype. And by using the word archetype instead of inner child, I'm also being guided to unveil something in this podcast that I've been developing through personal experience over the past few months. And I'm very excited to start sharing it. It is a framework that has the potential to awaken us to our own power and highest potential and to guide us in discovering who we truly are at the soul level in ways that are tangible within our physical reality. Inspired by the work of Caroline Myss on archetypes, it is a 12 archetypal wheel that I call my 12 soul suits archetypal wheel. Imagine a spiral in your heart center, in your heart garden, like the meditation I lead in podcast number 3. At the center of the spiral is a fountain connected to the divine source of pure crystalline water. From that center, there are 12 archetypes placed in a specific order from 1 to 12. It can resemble the spiral of past avatars in the movie Avatar: The Last Airbender, when Avatar Aang meditates to connect with the past avatars to get their wisdom, but only with 12. Each archetype is a vessel of power, the power of our soul. Each is a symbolic form that holds and transmits energy, shaping our choices, our attractions, and our life path. Unbeknownst to us, they've been active or inactive, either in light or in shadow, and often in shadow, isolated from each other and invisible to our awareness. My 12 soul suit archetypal wheel is being designed to help us activate and then harness the power of these archetypes individually and then as a whole system. It is about embodied co-creation at a whole new level, learning to speak the language of our soul through these 12 archetypes, which communicate with us through our body, our feelings, and our perception of reality using symbolic language, which is taught in this podcast. Co-creating with our 12 archetypes takes embodied co-creation to a whole new tangible meaning. One of the ways it does this is by immersing us in stories through animation, fairy tales, mythologies, musicals, stories expressed through art, and of course, children's books. Because really, who doesn't love stories or connect with specific characters? At the end of the day, everything is archetypal language. While each of our 12 soul suits archetypal wheel is unique, we all share 4 universal archetypes. Today, we will touch on these 4 vessels of power whose energy is waiting to be consciously activated and harnessed in light with every single one of us. These 4 universal archetypes are the following. The first one is the child archetype. That one is an easy one because we all have been a child. And in my opinion, it is much more powerful than the idea of the inner child. Because as one of the 12 archetypes, one of the 12 soul suits, it is a vessel of power that is always present within us and available to us. The child archetype represents the part of us that is curious, playful, trusting, and emotionally open. When nurtured, it brings creativity, joy, and healing, but when wounded, it can become fearful, sad, or withdrawn. The goal is not to remain childlike, but to reconnect with this part of ourselves so we can live with greater authenticity and light. In shadow, the child can be Veruca Salt from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, entitled, demanding, and prone to tantrums when she doesn't get her way. Or it can be Pinocchio, easily led astray, naive, and prone to lying to avoid consequences. And in light, the child archetype can be Alice from Alice in Wonderland, driven by curiosity, innocence, and a desire to explore the unknown. Or Moana, a young woman guided by her inner voice, courage, and deep connection to her heritage. The second archetype is what I call the co-creator. When in shadow, this archetype is often called the victim, but note that we create all the time by the simple fact that we are alive. So the victim is also a co-creator. So the co-creator in shadow, or the victim, brings codependency, spiritual bypass, unanchored vision, as well as performance or identity seeking, meaning co-creating to be seen, validated, or elevated, and disembodied abstraction, living in ideas and concepts without grounding them in our body and life. In its shadow, the co-creator is also controlling, arrogant, even destructive, and misusing its power, and can lead to blame, helplessness, and self-pity. So this co-creator can be Scar from The Lion King, manipulative and power-hungry, using others to achieve his own ends. Lord Voldemort from Harry Potter seeks to control and dominate, isolating himself from all connection. Or the evil queen from Snow White, obsessed with her own image and power, willing to destroy others to maintain her perceived superiority. In Light, the co-creator goes from victim to embodied co-creator. That is what Carl Jung describes as the hero's journey. The embodied co-creator brings harmony, collaboration, deep listening and resonance, shared vision and trust, integrity and transparency, embodied presence. The co-creator, when becoming embodied, activates its power by recognizing and claiming it, and then harnesses it, fostering empathy, sensitivity, humility, and weaving it with others to build something greater than itself. So service to others is a natural expression and essential part of the embodied co-creator. The embodied co-creator is Gandalf from Lord of the Rings, a wise mentor who guides and empowers others to fulfill their destiny, always in service to the greater good. Obi-Wan Kenobi from Star Wars, a patient teacher and strategist who collaborates with Luke Skywalker to restore balance to the Force. Or Mulan, a warrior who serves her family and country through courage, integrity, and collaboration with her fellow soldiers. The third universal archetype is what I call the gatekeeper. In shadow, it is the saboteur, as Caroline Myss calls it. Let me pause here for a moment to look at the etymology of saboteur, which derives from the French word saboter, to bungle, wreck, or walk noisily, and the noun sabot, a traditional wooden shoe or clog. A popular story, though not entirely verified, offers a useful visual. Workers allegedly threw wooden shoes or sabots into machines, causing disruption, wreckage, and noise. This image can help us anchor the archetype in its shadow form for us. So the gatekeeper in shadow, or saboteur, brings rigidity. It blocks passage out of fear of control. Judgment, it tests worthiness based on ego or dogma. Exclusion, it creates hierarchy and separation. It uses power to inflate self or diminish others. Sabotage, it prevents growth by creating unnecessary barriers. The gatekeeper in shadow is the White Witch from Narnia, blocks passage, freezes growth, and demands absolute loyalty. Sauron from Lord of the Rings, a dark lord who creates barriers and distortion to prevent others from accessing their power. Or the architect from the Matrix, a rigid, logical entity who maintains control through cycles of illusion and repetition. In Light, the gatekeeper becomes the sacred guardians and brings clear boundaries. It holds sacred space without rigidity. Discernment, it senses misalignment and protects coherence. Initiation, it guides passage through threshold with wisdom. Integrity, it tests intention, not identity. Service to others, it guards the gate for the highest good of all. In Light, the gatekeeper is Yoda from Star Wars, a wise and discerning master who tests Luke's readiness before training him. The Oracle from the Matrix, a mysterious figure who guides Neo with cryptic wisdom, allowing him to discover his own path. Or the Lion from Narnia, a powerful guardian who protects the sacred space and tests the hearts of those who enter. The fourth universal archetype is what I call the self-worth negotiator. While we are worthy by the simple fact that we exist, we, and specifically our self-worth negotiator, that Caroline Myss calls the prostitute, is all about how we value ourselves and what we're willing to exchange for love, validation, or survival. In shadow, self-worth negotiator lives at the intersection of desire, worth, and exchange, asking, what am I willing to give and what do I believe I deserve in return? Its main characteristics are self-betrayal. It trades its truth, body, or soul for external approval. Codependency. It seeks validation through pleasing others, losing its own voice. Martyrdom. It overgives and then resents the lack of return. Distorted desire. It confuses attention or reward with genuine love or worth. Exploitation. It allows itself to be used or uses others to fill an inner void. The self-worth negotiator is not about sex or money. It is about energy exchange. In shadow, it becomes a trap of self-diminishment or manipulation, like Cinderella, overgives and tolerates mistreatment, believing she must earn love through sacrifice. Ursula, the Little Mermaid, exploits Ariel's desire for love, demanding her voice in exchange for a temporary illusion. Gollum, Lord of the Rings, trade his identity and soul for the illusion of power and possession. When the self-worth negotiator operates in light, its main characteristics are clear value proposition. It knows its worth and doesn't overgive or undergive. Integrity in exchange. It engages in relationships and transactions with transparency and self-respect. Empowered boundaries. It sets limits based on self-love, not fear of loss. Authentic self-expression. It shares its gifts without needing to be validated or seen. Service through sovereignty. It serves from a place of wholeness, not sacrifice. In light, the self-worth negotiator honors our boundaries and receives our due. Like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, who sees beyond appearances, values her own intelligence, and refuses to be defined by others' expectation. Elsa from Frozen embraces her true power and worth, even when it means stepping away from external approval. And Katniss Everdeen from The Hunger Games, refusing to compromise her values for survival or fame. To summarize, the 4 universal archetypes that we have are: number 1, the child archetype; number 2, the co-creator, victim in shadow, embodied co-creator in light; number 3, the gatekeeper, the saboteur in shadow, the sacred guardian in light; and number 4, the self-worth negotiator, the prostitute in shadow, the sovereign anchor in light. Examples of archetypes from stories are useful because they help anchor these archetypes for us. I've given a few examples, but the one you choose for yourself are the one you connect with the most. They are the one that will guide you in anchoring your archetype. You can imagine them as counsels, mentors, or guides to your own archetype. Now, let's continue anchoring these 4 universal archetypes. In June, I started picking up breadcrumbs for this podcast. One of them was being guided to the children's book I'll be unveiling shortly. Another was a dream I remember vividly upon waking, with an intense feeling and striking details that stayed with me in my waking state. I wrote it down immediately, eager to understand its message, as it felt very potent. Note that when we work with dreams, it is helpful to notice the feeling present during the dream and upon waking, along with all the details. Even the ones that seem unimportant, they're often crucial. This is the dream. I am the observer, but I'm also each character in the dream. 2 toddlers are sitting on a large rectangular kitchen table, with an adult standing up, facing me as the observer of the scene. On the left side of the table sits 1 toddler, facing the adult, and on the right sits the other, sideways, facing both the other child and the adult. Both toddlers are seated with their legs crossed. They're different and the same, and they are also me. The adult is facing the toddler on the left, and I do not distinguish any features of their face. I only know that it is an adult and that is also me. The child on the right is speaking sweetly to the child on the left, who is sitting there, trusting and loving, trusting that both the adult and the child are loving, truthful, and benevolent toward them. Meanwhile, that toddler is being encased in brioche dough by the adult. It becomes clear without being fully shown that the child is going to die inside the dough when it is eventually placed in the oven. I do not see the entire act unfold. I only see the child sitting there as the dough is built up around them, enclosing them, while the child on the right speaks sweetly to that child. Still in the dream state, a feeling of horror overwhelms me, the observer. I now understand that the adult is the handler performing the task, faceless, impersonal, and heartless, doing what is told by the baby on the right, but also knowing the consequences of his action. The baby on the right represents pure evil, speaking sweetly to the child on the left and giving direction to the handler, while the baby encased in dough is still innocent, trusting, and unaware of the horror they're about to face. The most powerful element is not the image itself, but the feeling, a profound sense of horror, the horror of love being used as a disguise for harm, of betrayal so deep it feels absolute. The horror deepens when evil acts on children are carried out by children who have themselves been manipulated by adults. There is an understanding that the process will end in death and extraction through betrayal for consumption, though it is never shown, only the ceiling. And a message closes the dream that forgiving what is done to the child would be the ultimate act of forgiveness. I know this is very intense, but with reflection and time, I understand what gift this dream has been. First, the dream is not about forgiving evil acts in the world, especially those done to children, which are happening as we speak. Let's get that out of the way. It is much, much deeper in meaning, and like everything, it is multi-layered. But let's first connect the characters of the dream to our 4 universal archetypes. The child archetype is represented by the 2 toddlers. the innocent child on the left, and the wounded child on the right that I call the evil child. The innocent child encased in dough is also the co-creator in shadow, the victim. As the victim, they're not actually choosing their state, but they are subject to the forces around them. They represent the light that need to be freed. This is the part of me that is trapped, silenced, or hidden, the pure, vulnerable core that has been suppressed or overlooked. It is the innocent archetype in a state of disempowerment. The healing movement, or what I call the jarring movement, to get out of this loop is claiming my own power instead of waiting for someone to claim it for me, which is what is happening in the dream. The evil baby represents the gatekeeper in shadow, the saboteur, in its protective but destructive mode. It tries to prevent change, resist growth, or undermine progress, often out of fear or a misguided attempt to keep me safe. It acts as a barrier to my full expression. It stands at the threshold, attempting to control access to my light or my next level of awareness. The healing movement here is to listen to my resistance without immediately trying to override it. Instead of treating resistance as the enemy, I can approach it as a signal that something in me feels unsafe, unready, or unseen. So the movement is to pause, turn inward, and ask, what is this resistance protecting me from? What would happen if I step forward? What needs reassurance, grounding, or compassion before it can soften? In this way, the gatekeeper begins to transform. It no longer blocks the threshold blindly, but becomes a wiser guardian who can help me cross with more awareness and trust. The healing is not to force passage, but to build enough inner safety that the threshold no longer feels like danger or distortion. Then the energy that once sabotaged can become discernment, and the part that once resisted can become an ally in moving forward. And last but not least, the faceless, heartless, expressionless handler represents the self-worth negotiator in shadow, the prostitute who is not choosing to rescue the victim. It is performing a function, a negotiation of worth, but through control and emotional neutrality. It represents the part of me that has learned to survive by disconnecting from feeling, the parts that negotiates my value through performance and control, the part that has become stoic and faceless to avoid being hurt again. The healing movement or jarring movement is to find my self-worth through deep listening and trust in my inner guidance, knowing that it is not external. And about the message about forgiving such evil is again multi-layered, but overall it is a message guiding me towards self-forgiveness because I allowed myself to play the roles of the handler, the evil baby, and the victim. They are me and I am them. And yes, recognizing my responsibility, accepting it, and forgiving myself is the ultimate step. Using the archetypes make this possible, or at least more attainable, because although the archetypes are me, my soul suits, they create a little distance. They allow for detachment without refusing to face the truth. In fact, detachment is the opposite of denial, the opposite of fearfully avoiding the truth. It becomes a gentle nudge towards the courage to face what is true because the truth sets me free. Before moving to our children's book that is going to bring more light, lightness, and joy, we're going to courageously take a look at what evil is, since I've already used that word to describe my gatekeeper archetype, the baby on the right side of the table. Let's first look at the etymology of the word evil itself. In its earliest English use, the Old English word ifel, I-F-E-L or E-F-E-L, was a broad term that meant more than morally wicked. It could mean bad in a very general sense and describe something harmful, defective, unfortunate, cruel, unskillful, or disease-related. But that word is rooted in the Proto-Germanic word unveils, meaning over, beyond, excessive, wrong. This suggests that evil originally referred to something that exceeds boundaries, something that is out of balance or misaligned with natural order. So when we trace evil back to unveils, we're touching the original meaning of evil. Old English simply inherited and refined that resonance into a more culturally specific form. This shows us that evil does not point to an inherent force, but to a distortion in perception, a misalignment with coherence, an excess of separation. Evil is not a being, it is a state where a wounded child becomes a vessel for distortion, just like my evil, wounded child, gatekeeper in my dream became a vessel of distortion. So evil is rooted in distortion. The word distortion comes from the Latin distorsio, meaning a twisting, a contortion. It is derived from distorquere, which combines dis, apart, away, and torquere, to twist, to bend. At its root, distortion means to twist something out of its natural or original shape. We can imagine distortion as the static on a television. Imagine the field of consciousness as a television screen. When the signal is clear, we see coherent images, light, form, meaning. That is power as coherence. But when the signal is weak, scrambled, or interfered with, you see static, noise, fuzz, fragmentation. That is distortion. And when that static becomes so overwhelming that it blocks all signals and begins to simulate meaning through its own chaos, that is evil. Evil is rooted in distortion. Evil is distortion that has forgotten it is distortion. It begins to believe its own noise is the signal. So again, evil is distortion that has forgotten it is distortion and now believe it is coherence, alignment, or light. So where does shadow fit here? Shadow is not the same as distortion, but they are related and often intertwined, hence the confusion. Shadow is the unseen, unacknowledged, or unconscious aspect of the self. It contains hidden gifts, repressed emotions, and unintegrated archetypes. Shadow is neutral by nature. It's neither good nor bad. It becomes problematic when it is denied, projected, or identified with. The goal of shadow work is integration, bringing all the parts together, not elimination. Distortion is misaligned energy, a deviation from coherence. It is a field state, not a part of the self, contrary to shadow, as we just say, which is an aspect of the self. Distortion can arise from trauma, fear, resistance, or unresolved memory. And as we have said, it becomes evil when it forgets it is distortion and believes it is coherence. The goal with distortion is rephasing so that integration can follow. So shadow can carry distortion, but it is not distortion itself. Shadow can exist without distortion, which makes it easier to face. In my dream, the shadow appeared as the wounded child, the part of me that has become twisted by the belief that I was not wanted or seen. This belief created a distortion, causing me to hide my power and my light. So again, my shadow, the wounded child, carries distortion. This distortion was the pain of feeling unseen. So the shadow is unclaimed power, and the distortion is the story I tell myself about my unclaimed power. It is not real, but I believe it to be real, and to me it is real. I am in the loop, like under a spell, and to get out of the loop, what is needed is a jarring movement. The jarring movement was for me to get a divorce, a necessary break in the recursive loop to allow rephasing to begin and then integration. Okay, so we have learned a lot so far. Right now, we know that evil is not a being, a force, or a power. It is a state where a wounded child, that's the shadow, becomes a vessel for distortion, just like my wounded child in my dream became a vessel of distortion. Distortion is misaligned energy, a deviation from coherence, something twisted out of its original natural shape. Evil is rooted in distortion. Evil is distortion that has forgotten it is distortion and now believes it is coherence or light. Shadow is the unseen, unacknowledged, or unconscious aspect of the self. It is meant to be integrated, not eliminated. Shadow can carry distortion, but it is not distortion itself. Distortion is meant to be rephased or recalibrated, and then integration can begin. When earlier I introduced my 12 soul suit archetypal wheel, I defined an archetype as a vessel of power. Now we can refine this definition. Let's look at the etymology and meaning of the word power. The word power comes from the Old French pouvoir, which itself derives from the Latin potere, meaning to be able. The Latin root pot is linked to concepts of ability, capacity, and mastery. So at its root, power means the ability to do something, to act, to influence, or to be capable. True power is coherence in action. When I am in coherence, I can act without distortion. Power is not dominance, it is resonance. Therefore, an archetype is a vessel of power when activated and harnessed in coherence or light, and a vessel of distortion when activated and harnessed in shadow or in wounding. Shadow and evil are not power, they are imbalance. Shadow is not power, it is misaligned resonance. This is when a system is pulled into an unstable or destructive pattern by an external field. It is not necessarily broken internally, but it is resonating with something that pulls it out of its natural rhythm. This is like a radio picking up static. Evil is misaligned coherence. It is internal fragmentation, self-contradiction, and loss of integrity. It is the system turning against itself, a breakdown from within, a loss of self-coherence. This creates distortion, self-sabotage, and suffering. It is like an orchestra where each musician plays a different tempo. Resonance and coherence are powers. Resonance comes from the Latin resonantia, meaning an echo or resounding. It combines re, again, and sonare, to sound. So resonance literally means sounding again or echoing. Resonance is when one system vibrates in response to another. It's like a tuning fork, making another tuning fork vibrate without touching it. They are in sync. Coherent, from the Latin coherencia, combining co together, and haerere, to sting or cling, literally means sticking together or holding as one. It means my thoughts, feelings, and action are integrated and consistent. It is when all parts of a system are working together in harmony and alignment. It is like an orchestra where everyone plays the same tempo, in tune, and with shared intention. So to me, coherence is vertical, and in short, it is the internal alignment within a system, individual, group, or field. Resonance is horizontal, and in short, it is the interconnection between two or more coherent systems. Therefore, now we can more accurately define archetype as vessel that we are meant to activate and harness when expressing coherence, vessel that we are meant to first rephase and then integrate when they express in distortion. So this is the definition we have right now. Archetypes are vessels of our coherent potential. We can even be more precise and say archetypes are vessels of our highest coherent potential. Now let's anchor this concept with a visual I received in a meditation. Imagine a carnivorous plant rooted in the earth. What we see are its flowers, beautiful, seductive, deep, red, lush, sensual, almost spellbinding, with touches of yellow, pink, and orange. They are mesmerizing, and yet they are sinister. These flowers must consume to survive. Carnivorous plants evolved in response to a lack of nourishment or nurturing. Nutrition and nurture share the same Latin root, nutrire, to feed, to nourish, to suckle. Unable to receive what they needed from the soil, these plants adapted by seeking sustenance elsewhere. The vision is to see these flowers as a visual representation of evil, the visible acts of evil, and a mirror of our collective responsibility. The roots are hidden. They are our daily, invisible acts of conscious and unconscious choice, our willingness to let distortion feed on our reaction. Every small moment of fear, anger, judgment, even in something as mundane as being angrily stuck in traffic, becomes nourishment. These roots sustain the visible flowers, the grand, horrifying expression of evil we recognize in history. Many forms of collective harm begin not with overt malice, but with subtle enticements that, when unchecked, begin to feel incoherence, twisted to serve distortion. The nutrient-poor soil reflects a field that has lost its connection to source, forcing it to extract energy from others. And at the very base, in the soil itself, lies the innocence of children, first consumed when distortion takes hold. When adults operate from unhealed archetypes, children often become the first mirrors to absorb that distortion, either through mimicry, trauma, or energetic entrainment. This underscores the urgency of healing our own archetypes, starting with our child archetype, not just for personal growth, but to protect the field of the next generation. Visible evil, the flower, is rooted in invisible distortion. When we allow ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, to be moved by distorted states, we're feeding the system that eventually manifests as collective violence. So, and I know it is hard to hear, but the truth sets us free. Evil is the choice to make again and again to allow distortion to move through us, or if we want to use detachment, to allow our archetypes to be vessels of distortion instead of vessels of coherent power. This is why we must speak about evil. To speak of evil is not to empower it, but to recognize where coherence has been lost. And we must learn to recognize it, to understand it, and to see how our smallest choices participate in its growth. We must also question what else contributes: the normalization of distortion, the quiet acceptance of harm, and the moments when silence itself becomes complicity. By not dwelling in darkness, but tracing its roots, interrupting its feeding patterns, bringing awareness to the roots, we can starve the flowers. And it starts within us with every single choice we make. And where can we begin? By understanding our own shadow and choosing the path of integration. Our deep dive is going to offer us a visual language for this inner work. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the incredible, stunning book, The Dark and the Light by Kerstin and illustrated by Julie Völk, translated from German by David Henry Wilson. Kerstin is a German author whose path has been deeply shaped by personal loss when her son died shortly before his 4th birthday. She describes herself as both an author, a grief companion, and a bereaved mother. Her work turns toward the heart and the depth of the soul, focusing on wounds, loss, relationships, self-discovery, resilience, and the inner resources that help people go on living. Her picture book debut, Das Dunkel and das Helle, The Dark and the Light, illustrated by Julie Völk, was widely noticed, translated, and published internationally, and has received multiple awards and recommendations. Julie Völk is an Austrian and a full-time illustrator of picture books and children's books. The Dark and the Light. Shaggy, crowned in the darkness, looked across the place of shining colors. Oh, if only I could go there. If only I knew how, but I can't do it on my own. He sighed and his heart felt heavy. Sparkle, bathed in the sunshine, she squinted across at the place where everything was dark. Oh, how dark and gloomy it is. I would not want to go there, but I'm curious all the same. Shaggy was brave. He put on his rubber boots and plodded toward the sunshine. I will just go to the edge of the darkness and have a quick look and then come back. Sparkle was brave. She picked up a flashlight and walked toward the darkness. I'll just go to the edge of the light, have a quick look, and then come back. Shaggy stood at the edge of the darkness and saw silhouettes in the bright light. Sparkle stood at the edge of the light and saw 2 eyes in the darkness. They both stood there for a long time, looking at each other. Then Shaggy disappeared into the night, where there was not a glimmer to be seen, and Sparkle returned to the colors. The next day, they met again, and they met again the day after that. Hello, you there in the light. Who are you? Asked Shaggy. Sparkle was startled. Whoosh! Away she ran. Many of us are afraid of the dark. The next day, Shaggy waited for Sparkle. She didn't come. Shaggy's head dropped. I will come here again tomorrow, but it will be the last time. When Shaggy came to the border for the last time, Sparkles was already waiting there. Hello, you there in the dark. Who are you? She asked in a trembling voice. Her little heart was so nervous that it fluttered like a butterfly. Me? I'm Shaggy, and you? I'm Sparkle. Will you be my friend? She asked as her knees shook. Me, your friend? Yes, I'd love that, said Shaggy with a smile, and his joyful heart leaped like a frog. He had been wishing and wishing he could have a friend. At the border, it was neither dark nor light. There was a band of gray-blue, half light and half dark. Sparkle entered the band for the first time. Shaggy entered the band for the first time. In the excitement, the hair on their necks stood on end. They tickled like the tiny legs of 100 insects. It's nice to have a friend like you, said Shaggy, who was now closer to the colors than he had ever been before. It's nice to have a friend like you, said Sparkle, who was now closer to the darkness than she had ever been before. From now on, the two of them met every day. One day, and only for a moment, Shaggy dared to go with Sparkles into the light. Of course, he took a parasol with him. Sparkle held Shaggy's hand and said, "Don't be afraid, I'm here with you." Shaggy was not at all afraid because he had a friend beside him. All the same, he was excited and wagged his little tail. Every day now, we'll go a little further into the shining colors, said Sparkle. Oh yes, said Shaggy happily. From that moment on, bright spots began to appear on his dark coat. Do you think your coat will grow completely light? No, the darkness can never leave the coat completely, but a spotted coat is very beautiful, said Shaggy. That's true, said One day, Shaggy waited and waited for Sparkle. Where can she be, he wondered, and scratched his head. After a while, he said, I must go and find her, all on my own. With determined steps, he walked through the gray-blue band. Then he jumped across the edge of the light and stood before the laughing sun. Shaggy was very proud of himself as he hurried toward his friend's house. Sparkle, I'm here! I made it! Oh! Shaggy stood as if rooted to the spot, his eyes wide with shock. His friend's house had disappeared. Nothing was left. All that remained to show that something had once been there was a large, deep hole that split the ground like an open wound. Shaggy raced home as fast as he could, back into the heart of the darkness. Oh dear, he moaned, but when Shaggy reached his house, his mouth fell wide open in sheer amazement. It's you, he cried, you're here! To his great joy, he found Sparkle standing outside his front door. But then he saw that his friend was crying. What happened? Something swallowed up my house. Suddenly, everything went dark, sobbed Sparkle, and her bright coat grew darker with every tear. Shaggy held his friend very tightly. That's how I felt too. I'm frightened. It's all so strange, wept Sparkle. I know, said Shaggy. There are a lot of eyes to look at you, and claws to clutch at you, and toads to croak at you, but you will get used to them, and they won't hurt you. We're friends, and we'll get through this together. Yes, sniffled Sparkle. She couldn't say anymore. Gradually, she got used to the gloomy darkness, and soon she didn't even need her flashlight. The friends play hide and seek or tag with the croaking toads and the owners of the eyes and claws. The toads and clawed creatures were really quite harmless. One day, Shaggy said to Sparkle, "Today we'll go back to the Grey-Blue Band." "Really?" said Sparkle hesitantly. "Really," said Shaggy with a smile. Hand in hand, they set off. For a long time, they stood looking at the colors. Then they went back into the darkness. One day, and only for a moment, Sparkle dared to go back into the light again with Shaggy. They took a parasol, of course. Shaggy held Sparkle's hand and said, "Don't be afraid, I'm here with you." Sparkle was not at all afraid because she had a friend beside her. All the same, she was excited and wagged a little tail. "Let's do this every day now," said Shaggy. "Oh yes," said Sparkle happily, and from that moment on, bright spots began to appear on the darkened coat. After a few visits, the two friends built a new house in the place of shining colors, but they also kept their other house back in the darkness. They were not at all afraid of the dark. They both agreed that there was nothing better in the whole world than to have a friend who understood the need for a parasol and a flashlight. And then there's a note. The pictures in this book were made using a special technique called cyanotype. Cyanotype is one of the very first processes used in photography. It was invented in 1842 by the English scientist and astronomer Sir John Herschel. A typical feature of this technique is the different shades of blue. And there's also a simple explanation on how to do your own cyanotypes at home. Now, let's take a good look at the cover. The Dark and the Light presents a title that is literally split between two worlds. The dark appears in white letters against a deep blue background, while the light is written in navy letters on an ivory field, visually dividing night and day down the center of the page. Across this boundary runs a bright red arch bridge, spanning the deep blue on the left and the pale luminous space on the right. On the bridge, the two main characters walk side by side, happily holding hands as they move from shadow toward color. Shaggy, a tall, slender, dark and shaggy figure, and Sparkle, a smaller, rounder, glowing white figure. At the foot of the bridge, small yellow flowers with red centers bloom like tiny lanterns growing out of the darkness. On the right side, a large yellow tree crowned with red and green dots rise above the bridge, its branches suggesting a sunburst of leaves and light. Shaggy's dark fur is flecked with white, especially around the head and neck, hinting that light has already begun to seep into the shadows. He carries a parasol that is black inside and red on the outside, and he wears sturdy yellow boots, as if equipped to cross emotional weather as well as physical terrain. Sparkle, like Shaggy, has rosy cheeks and a gentle smile, but her body is made of soft, radiant white, edged with delicate sparkles. She wears red shoes and a silver belt composed of tiny loops, giving this luminous figure a sense of playfulness. The colors white and blue in the title are significant. White suggests purity and truth, while blue evokes depth, intuition, and the subconscious. The split title and background stage the book as an encounter between two inner worlds. Shadow and light, dark and light, are not separate. Rather than opposite each other, these realms are literally bridged by a vivid red arch that suggests relationship, courage, and the heart's willingness to travel between states so that transformation may begin. The fact that dark, Shaggy, and light, Sparkle, are walking hand in hand implies integration rather than elimination. The dark is not banished, it is accompanied. Shaggy's parasol and boots evoke protection and preparedness, as if the dark figure must equip itself to risk crossing into new territory. The black inside the umbrella or parasol shields him from overwhelming light, while the red exterior represents passion, courage, and life force. The yellow boots symbolize personal power, the solar plexus, joy, and intellect grounded into the physical world, suggesting that even the dark must walk with intention and joy. Shaggy's white spot on his fur represents emerging awareness or light breaking through the shadow. Integration is in process, it is not instant. By contrast, is unarmored and ornamental, with the little loops of silver around her body and her bright red shoes. She radiates sparkles, embodying innocence, joy, and divine light, carrying the aesthetics of delight and imagination into the journey. Yet her radiance is not naive. It is a conscious choice to embody clarity. Her red shoes signify grounding, vitality, and a sacred feminine. They connect her to the earth, showing that light must be embodied to be real. Her belt of silver loops represent intuition, the moon, and a reflective mirror. The loops suggests cycles, interconnectedness, and the ability to hold multiple reflections without distortion. The flowers at the base of the bridge, a symbol of transition, connection, and the path between worlds, and the luminous tree with its multicolored dots introduce a third space. Yellow flowers with red centers, yellow for intellect and joy, red for the heart, represent the blossoming of consciousness. The large yellow tree with red and green dots symbolizes growth, balance, wisdom, and connection to both earth and sky. Flowers and tree at the base of the bridge ground the journey in love and wisdom, suggesting that when dark and light walk together, something entirely new can emerge. This cover offers a profound visual narrative of integration and echoes Maria Lai's extraordinary textile work, Holding the Shadow by the Hand. In this exquisite fairy tale book, originally conceived as fabric pages sewn together with collages of dyed textiles, yarn, and threads, Lai explores the necessity of embracing one's shadow, not as something negative, but as an essential part of the self. Having seen the original work in a museum and now its 1987 printed version, I can feel how faithfully the symbolic language translates across mediums. The cover of the printed edition depicts the protagonist, a pink rectangle holding hands with its shadow, a large black rectangle. This simple yet striking image encapsulates the entire journey, not separation, but relationship, again echoing the relationship of Shaggy and Sparkles. Let's now take a look at the first spread of the dark and the light. On the left side, we see Shaggy seated at the foot of a tree, positioned on the far left of the page and facing away from the center. The tree is in fact a delicate cyanotype-inspired plant, reminiscent of Anna Atkins' work, the first woman to use this technique. A white bird with a red beak rests within its branches, and on the other side of the plant sits a tiny white chair. Shaggy's yellow boots lie on the ground, as if hastily removed and forgotten. His cheeks are rosy, he's not smiling, yet through his back turned to the opposite page, he glances toward it. The text reads, Shaggy, crowned in the darkness, looked across at the place of shining colors. Oh, if only I could go there, if only I knew how, but I can't do it on my own. He sighed, and his heart felt heavy. On the facing page, in striking contrast, there's an explosion of bright, vivid color against a white background. House in blues, reds, greens, and oranges, 7 yellow trees with red flowers, the red bridge from the cover in the distance, and clusters of flowers blooming in the lower right corner. Near the centerfold lies Sparkle, resting on the grass beside a tall orange, red, and yellow flower. Her small red shoes are placed neatly beside her, facing towards Shaggy's yellow boots. A watering can with a yellow flower sits nearby, and a belt hangs from the stem of the giant flower. Sparkle reclines with her legs crossed, propped on her right elbow, her left hand resting just above her navel. Her cheeks are rosy, she appears relaxed, yet her gaze is curious, directed toward the dark side. The text reads, Sparkle bathed in the sunshine, she squinted across at the place where everything was dark. Oh, how dark and gloomy it is. I would not want to go there, but I'm curious all the same. This spread is not simply about dark versus light, but about two incomplete states of being. Shaggy represents longing and perceived lack. He believes what he needs exists somewhere else and that he cannot reach it alone. His world, rendered in cyanotype, suggests a life of impressions rather than full vitality, and his removed boots and the empty chair signal untapped agency. However, the white bird with the red beak resting in the tree suggests that even in his state of perceived lack, there is a spark of vitality or a higher aspect of himself that remains active and observant. Sparkle, surrounded by color and abundance, represents ease and embodiment, but also a subtle avoidance of venturing beyond her comfort zone, suggested by her hand resting on her solar plexus. She's comfortable and curious, yet assumes the darkness has nothing to offer her. Her belt hanging on the stem of the flower hints at an untapped potential for impact. Both characters are oriented toward each other, showing that connection is already possible. The placement of their shoes facing one another suggests movement and meeting, though neither has taken the step. Shaggy holds the shadow of heaviness and yearning, while Sparkle holds the shadow of avoidance and surface-level harmony. Each contains what the other lacks. The detail of their rosy cheeks unifies them, reminding us that they share a common humanity and capacity for feeling. The red bridge in the background hints that a path between them already exists. Even if not yet fully formed or recognized, it is a promise of connection. In essence, these first spreads mirror an initial separation alongside a latent desire for reunion. Shaggy yearns for the light, and Sparkle is curious about the dark. Both are looking across, but neither has yet taken the step. The stage is set for the journey of integration. On spread number 2, the text reads, Shaggy was brave. He put on his rubber boots and plodded toward the sunshine. I will just go to the edge of the darkness and have a quick look and then come back. Sparkle was brave. She picked up a flashlight and walked toward the darkness. I'll just go to the edge of the light, have a quick look, and then come back. We see Shaggy venturing toward the light side. He walks tall with a timid smile on his face. Behind him remain the empty chair, the plant, and the white bird now on the ground. In front of him are flowers, and his house appears in the background. On Sparkle's side, the same explosion of color fills the page as before, but now we also see two people walking their dogs who have stopped to greet each other. Sparkle has put on her silver belts and her red shoes, and she walks toward the dark side, holding a flashlight in her right hand, wearing the same curious, shy smile, both fearful and excited. As on the previous page, her shadow and the shadow of the watering can appear in blue like a cyanotype. This spread marks a shift from contemplation to action, the threshold moment where curiosity becomes courage. Their plan, to just look and return, is what makes the inspired action possible. Real courage, taken one step at a time. Shaggy putting his boots back on signals the reclaiming of agency. The white bird now on the ground indicates that guidance, or higher awareness, is becoming more accessible, less distant. His house, visible in the background, represents his inner structure, his sense of self, and his roots, now visible and supportive rather than hidden. Sparkle, in contrast, equips herself with a flashlight. She brings light into the darkness rather than entering it empty-handed. This suggests a desire to stay in control, to illuminate the darkness rather than become one with it. Putting on her shoes and her belt activates her capacity for movement and expression, signaling a readiness she did not embody before. The presence of people greeting each other in her world reinforces what she's stepping away from: connection that is already easy and familiar. Her movement toward darkness is therefore a movement toward the unknown, not out of lack, but out of curiosity. The recurring cyanotype blue shadows on her side suggest that the dark already exists within the light, just as the potential for light exists in Shaggy's world. This also suggests that the dark is not external, but internal. As the polarity begins to dissolve, the shadow becomes visible within the light. Both characters have taken their first conscious step toward each other, not out of desperation, but out of curiosity and a growing sense of agency. They're still protected by their plans and safeguards, but the polarity has begun to dissolve, and the first movement toward integration is underway. It is the threshold of transformation. The moment we sense there is more to life than this and find the courage to move toward the unknown. On the next thread, the text reads, Shaggy stood at the edge of the darkness and saw silhouettes in the bright light. Sparkle stood at the edge of the light and saw two eyes in the darkness. They both stood there for a long time looking at each other. Then Shaggy disappeared into the night where there was not a glimmer to be seen, and Sparkle returned to the colors. The next day, they met again, and they met again the day after that. "Hello, you in there in the light. Who are you?" asked Shaggy. Sparkle was startled. Whoosh! Away she ran. Many of us are afraid of the dark. On the left, the background is almost solid dark blue, and we see only Shaggy's eyes, big, round, and fixed straight on Sparkle, as if mesmerized. On Sparkle's side, the scene feels dreamlike. Large shapes and objects, flower, trees, houses, the watering can, and the bridge appear as loose outlines in red and yellow against a white background. Sparkle herself is an oval form with red and yellow outlines, one yellow arm waving on one leg with a single red shoe. The background carries traces of blue, like a cyanotype that has not been exposed long enough to have a lasting impression. This spread moves from approach to encounter, the moment when the unknown is no longer distant, but relational. At the edge, each sees only a fragment of the other. Shaggy's perceived silhouette, while Sparkle sees only eyes. This partial perception reflects projection. Each is encountering not the other in full, but a simplified image shaped by their own inner world. Shaggy's disembodied eyes in the darkness suggest pure awareness without form, a consciousness that is present but not yet integrated. His gaze is steady, almost mesmerized, indicating openness without defense. The line, "Shaggy disappeared into the night," points to more than a retreat. It is a symbolic return to the unmanifest. Shaggy, as pure awareness, dissolves back into the formless. This reinforces the idea that the darkness is not just an absence of light, but a field of potential, a womb of creation. His disappearance is not a failure, it is a necessary phase of integration. Sparkle's world, by contrast, becomes dreamlike and less defined. The familiar structure of her colorful reality dissolves into outlines, suggesting that her sense of certainty and form begins to destabilize upon contact with the unknown. Her single red shoe is a subtle but powerful symbol, suggesting imbalance. She's not fully grounded in her encounter with the darkness. Standing on one leg further emphasizes this instability. It becomes clear that her flight is not only fear, but also a lack of firm footing in the face of the unknown. The line, "Hello, you there in the light, who are you?" is the first verbal exchange initiated by Shaggy. He asks, "Who are you?" not "What are you?" This shift from object to subject marks the beginning of relational awareness, the recognition of the other as a being, not just a silhouette or a pair of eyes. Sparkle's running away reveals a threshold reaction. Curiosity gives way to fear when the encounter becomes real. The line, "Many of us are afraid of the dark," expands this moment into a universal human experience. The repeated meetings suggest that integration is not a single event, but a gradual process of exposure and retreat, contact and withdrawal. The faint cyanotype blue on her side is especially significant. Cyanotypes are photographic prints made by exposing treated paper to light. The faint blue suggests that the darkness is beginning to develop within her. It is becoming part of her inner landscape, even if not yet fully formed, marking the beginning of her shadow integration. Symbolically, this spread captures the moment when the other is no longer an idea, but a presence, and the nervous system must adjust. It is the beginning of relationship and the surfacing of fear. This is the stage where the journey shifts from observation to participation. Uncertain, disorienting, and at times frightening, yet deeply transformative. It is the threshold of integration. On the next spread, we return to the contrast between Shaggy's blue cyanotype world and Sparkle's vibrant, multicolored side, filled with houses, bridge, tree, flowers, and even a family. This time, however, the white space expands, spreading across nearly half of Shaggy's page. The text reads, "The next day, Shaggy waited for Sparkle. She didn't come. Shaggy's head dropped. I will come here again tomorrow, but it will be the last time." Shaggy sits on his half-blue side with his boots on, holding a flower and plucking its petals one by one. She loves me not. The petals lie scattered on the ground around him, all but one, which he is about to pull. He stares at it sadly, unable to look toward the light side, yet holding on to the hope that when he finally looks up, Sparkle will be there. The white bird appears again in the background on the ground, but further away. On the light side, we see Sparkle's blue footprints from her last visit, though it is unclear which direction they lead. Nearby are her flower, her watering can, and the hanger that once held her silver belt. At the threshold, where blue meets white, a few small flowers grow, and a delicate yellow butterfly hovers near the beginning, or perhaps the end of the footprints. This spread marks a deepening of the emotional journey, the movement from encounter into absence, uncertainty, and vulnerability. Shaggy's waiting introduces the experience of longing without response. His gesture of plucking the flower reveals a shift from earlier courage into doubt and lack of self-worth. Instead of moving, he waits and seeks confirmation, signaling more than a loss of agency, a descent into the wounded masculine archetype. He has moved from pure awareness, eyes in the darkness, to seeking external validation. She loves me not. It is a crucial phase in integration, where the masculine must experience vulnerability and loss of control in order to soften and become receptive. The expansion of white into his blue world is significant. The light is no longer distant, it is entering his inner landscape. Yet, rather than bringing clarity, it creates ambiguity, hope mixed with disappointment. It also represents the dissolution of rigid identity. His blue world, once a clear boundary, is being softened by the white. This signals a symbolic death of the old self, making space for something new to emerge. The white bird, now further away, suggests that guidance or inner knowing feels more distant in this moment of emotional contraction. The statement, "I will come here again tomorrow, but it will be the last time," carries the weight of an ultimatum. It reflects fear of rejection, a threat to self-worth, and the ego's attempt to regain control. The saboteur archetype, the self-worth negotiator in shadow, emerges here, imposing limits and creating a deadline that risks cutting off a genuine connection before it has time to unfold. On Sparkle's side, her absence is represented through traces, footprints, objects, impressions. She's no longer physically present, but her imprint remains. The unclear direction of the footprints reflects uncertainty. Did she move forward, retreat, or pause? From Shaggy's perspective, the path is unreadable. This becomes an invitation for him to internalize her presence, to hold her inwardly rather than relying on her physical form, a step toward inner coherence. The threshold space becomes especially alive. Small flowers and the yellow butterfly emerge where blue meets white. This indicates that transformation is happening precisely at the point of tension, the liminal space between worlds, while the old self dissolves and the new self begins to form. The butterfly, a symbol of metamorphosis, suggests that something subtle yet essential is unfolding. Its yellow color evokes the solar plexus, personal power, clarity, and discernment. This spread is the crucible of integration. It tests whether the connection established earlier can be sustained without immediate reassurance. It asks, can you hold the memory of connection without constant presence? Can you trust the process, even when the path is unclear? Can you remain open to transformation, even when it feels like nothing is happening? On the next spread, the blue now spreads gently into the white page, and the red bridge on the right side appears much larger. The text reads, "When Shaggy came to the border for the last time, Sparkle was already waiting there. Hello, you there in the dark. Who are you?" she asked in a trembling voice. Her little heart was so nervous that it fluttered like a butterfly. "Me, I'm Shaggy, and you?" "I'm Sparkle. Will you be my friend?" she asked, her knees shaking. "Me, your friend? Yes, I'd love that," said Shaggy with a smile, and his joyful heart leaped like a frog. He had been wishing and wishing he could have a friend. Shaggy stands at the upper edge of the darkest blue on the left page, looking down towards Sparkle. Sparkle stands at the lower right corner of the white page, holding a flashlight and shining it towards Shaggy. The beam of light turns blue, then dark blue, and fades before reaching him. Their faces are not fully smiling, but soft, filled with nervous joy. The white bird is perched on a flower a few feet in front of Shaggy, close to the bridge, which appears much larger in the background. Flowers adorn the lower portion of both sides of the spread. The yellow butterfly, now joined by touches of green, turns towards Shaggy, and a small green frog looks towards Sparkle with a gentle smile. This spread marks the moment of mutual recognition, the shift from projection and absence into relationship. For the first time, both Shaggy and Sparkle arrive together at the threshold, and Sparkle speaks first. Her trembling voice and fluttering heart signal that courage is now shared. What was one curiosity has matured into vulnerability. Shaggy's response, simple and open, reflects a readiness shaped by longing and waiting. The question, "Will you be my friend?" is symbolically profound. It marks the transition from attraction to alignment, from desire to devotion to a shared field. It is no longer about observing or approaching the other, but about entering into relationship. This is not a romantic question, but a soul-level invitation to embodied co-creation. The answer is immediate and wholehearted, suggesting alignment. Both are now available to co-create in coherence, resonating with each other. The spatial dynamic is important. Shaggy remains in the dark, elevated, while Sparkle stands in the light below, shining her flashlight upward. Yet, the light fades before reaching him, suggesting that darkness cannot be fully illuminated from the outside. It must be entered and experienced directly. Shaggy's journey is not about being saved by light, but about learning to see in the dark to find his own inner light. The bridge, now larger, signals that connection is no longer distant or abstract. It is becoming a real, accessible pathway. Around it, the presence of multiple birds, white, colorful, and brown, suggests a growing dialogue between different aspects of being: spirit, vitality, and the integrated self. The white bird, now closer and elevated on the flower, indicates that guidance is more accessible. The colorful bird facing it suggests reciprocity and exchange between worlds rather than a one-sided longing. At the base of the image, the butterfly and the frog introduce a powerful pairing of transformation and emotional awakening. The butterfly, now touched with green, suggests that transformation is becoming embodied and heart-centered. The frog, linked to emotional expression and renewal, mirrors Shaggy's leaping heart, signaling joy arising from connection. The diminishing dominance of white and the expansion of shared space indicate that the polarity between dark and light is softening. This becomes a visual metaphor for integration. The two sides are no longer separate, but coexisting within a harmonic field. This spread is the moment of convergence, when polarity dissolves into coherence, longing transforms into presence, and fear gives way to nervous joy. The path is no longer external. It is co-created by two beings who choose to walk together, not in fusion, but in harmonic resonance. On the next spread, both pages are blue, darker on the left and lighter on the right, forming a beautiful gradient from deep to pale blue across the spread. We now see a close-up of Shaggy on the left and Sparkle on the right, each filling their respective page. The text reads, "At the border, it was neither dark nor light. There was a band of gray-blue, half light and half dark." Sparkle entered the band for the first time. Shaggy entered the band for the first time. In the excitement, the hair on their necks stood on end. They tickled like the tiny legs of 100 insects. "It's nice to have a friend like you," said Shaggy, who was now closer to the colors than he had ever been before. Shaggy walks towards Sparkle, looking directly at her, his left foot lifted mid-step. He appears excited, intentional, and determined. Sparkle mirrors him, radiant, with her foot also caught mid-step, equally intentional, excited, and engaged. Above Sparkle, the medium-sized colorful bird is perched on a flower. On the left, near Shaggy's feet, the butterfly rests on the flower, now with orange and blue wings. These spreads represent the entry into the liminal space, the true field of integration. The blue gradient dissolves the former opposition between dark and light, creating a visual representation of the spectrum of consciousness, from the deep unconscious dark blue to the conscious pale blue, not as separate realms, but as a continuum. This signals that polarity is no longer experienced as separation, but as continuity. The band of gray-blue becomes a living threshold, neither one nor the other, but both at once. For the first time, both Shaggy and Sparkle fully enter this in-between space together. This is significant. Integration does not happen by crossing into the other side, but by inhabiting the space between. The sensation they feel suggests nervous system activation, the body registering transformation in real time. Shaggy's statement, "It's nice to have a friend like you," is deeply revealing. He is still no closer to the colors, meaning the external goal has not been achieved. True fulfillment is not found in reaching a destination, but in inhabiting the journey with another, The relationship itself becomes the fulfillment, the destination. Their mirrored movement, both stepping forward with intention, signal mutual agency and reciprocity. This is no longer a dynamic of reaching or retreating, but of co-creation. They meet as equals within the same field. The butterfly, now with orange and blue wings, symbolizes alchemical union. Blue, Shaggy's world, throat, third eye, and warm color, Sparkle's world, solar plexus, suggesting that personal power is now integrated with communication and intuition. The colorful bird above Sparkle remains present, but now within the shared blue field, indicating that vitality and expression are no longer confined to one side, they are entering the relational space as well. This is the space of coherence, where identity softens, polarity dissolves, and relationship becomes the path. It is not resolution, it is integration in motion, where the journey becomes the destination. We might imagine here the four universal archetypes, the co-creator, the child, the gatekeeper, and the self-worth negotiator, now activated and walking in coherence like Shaggy and Sparkle. On the next spread, we see Shaggy and Sparkle walking hand in hand in the white space beneath the red bridge, with the blue just behind them. The colorful birds stand on the bridge looking down at them with surprise. The text reads, "One day, and only for a moment, Shaggy dared to go with Sparkle into the light. Of course, he took a parasol with him. Sparkle held Shaggy's hand and said, 'Don't be afraid, I'm here with you.' Shaggy was not afraid at all because he had a friend beside him. All the same, he was excited and wagged his little tail. 'Every day now we'll go a little further into the shining colors,' said Sparkle. 'Oh yes,' said Shaggy happily. From that moment on, bright spots began to appear on his dark coat. On the right page, we see a different scene. Sparkle is now wearing a belt with blue feathers and colorful socks. She hangs more striped socks on a line stretched between a yellow tree and one of the 5 visible feet of the red bridge. A green bottle sits nearby. On top of the bridge, 5 small yellow birds are gathered. Sparkle asks, "Do you think your coat will grow completely light?" "No, the darkness can never leave the coat completely, but a spotted coat is very beautiful," said Shaggy. "That's true," said Sparkle. This spread marks the transition from shared space into lived integration, where relationship begins to transform identity. Shaggy's movement into the light, even for a moment, is significant. Integration happens gradually, in tolerable doses. The parasol reflects a wise boundary. He's not abandoning himself to the light, but learning how to be in it safely. Sparkle's hand represents co-regulation. He can go further because he's not alone. Shaggy's wagging tail is a simple but profound gesture, showing joy, trust, and safety, the body's confirmation that the integration is real and coherent. The appearance of bright spot on his dark coat is a powerful image of integration. The goal is no longer to become fully light, but to allow light to permeate the dark. His later statement confirms this. Wholeness is not purity, but pattern, complex, mixed, and alive. As reflected in holding your shadow by the hand, and as we explored earlier, the shadow is not to be eliminated, but integrated. In the integrated state, light and dark are woven together into a new coherence. Sparkle on the right page is now incorporating blue into her world through her clothing and action. She's no longer untouched by the dark. She's integrating it into her expression. Hanging the socks suggests a process of airing, balancing, and making visible what was once internal, a gentle domestic form of integration. The red bridge, now actively used and inhabited by birds, becomes a living structure of connection rather than a distant symbol. The 5 yellow birds, echoing the solar plexus, identity, joy, and awareness, represent aspects of Shaggy and Sparkle's embodied co-creation. They do not judge, but witness the union unfolding with surprise and quiet joy. The green bottle can be seen as a symbol of healing, or perhaps more precisely, integration. It suggests that integration itself is healing. Increasingly, I find myself using the word integration rather than healing, as it captures more accurately the process of bringing all parts into coherence. Their dialogue reveals a key shift. The desire for total transformation, completely light, gives way to an acceptance of complexity. Shaggy's response holds the wisdom of integration. The dark remains, but it is no longer feared or dominant. It becomes part of a new beauty. This spread embodies integration, not the erasure of one pole, but the creation of a new coherent whole where both are visible, functional, and valued. This spread embodies integration, not the erasure of one pole, but the creation of a new, coherent whole where both are visible, functional, and valued. On the next spread, the text reads, "One day, Shaggy waited and waited for Sparkle. Where can she be?" he wondered, and scratched his head. After a while, he said, "I must go and find her, all on my own." With determined steps, he walked through the great blue band. Then he jumped across the edge of the light and stood before the laughing sun. Shaggy was very proud of himself as he hurried toward his friend's house. "Sparkle, I'm here, I made it." We see Shaggy 3 times, jumping from the left side of the page, from the dark blue toward the right side of the page, and into the light of the white page. All 3 Shaggies wear colorful striped socks and yellow boots, but only the first holds his red umbrella or parasol behind his back, ready to jump with a look of preparedness and excitement. An unusual creature, a small crocodile-like figure on legs with red flowers on its back, looks at Shaggy and seems to be cheering him on, among flowers that grow more colorful as they spread toward the white page and the light. The second Shaggy is caught mid-air, arms raised and fingers spread wide, with a look of excitement, expansion, and freedom. In his excitement, he has dropped the parasol which hangs behind him in mid-air. The third Shaggy is still caught mid-air but on the descent, feet ready for a smooth landing with a happy, focused, confident look on his face. On the right page, which is white, a bright sun shines, with eyes, a mouth, a nose, cheeks, and red sun rays. The sun is looking at Shaggy and smiling as if welcoming him. Above the sun, the colorful bird with green wings is flying in the sunlight for the first time, not focused on Shaggy, but delighting in his own experience. Shaggy is no longer only approaching the light, he is moving through it. This spread symbolizes a true crossing into embodied confidence. Shaggy is no longer only approaching the light, he is moving through it. And the 3 figures show the arc from preparation to surrender to landing. The dropped umbrella is especially meaningful. What once served as protection or mediation is no longer being held tightly. In the moment of full movement, it is released. That suggests trust, momentum, and a temporary letting go of control, as Shaggy discovers that he can move through the unknown without being fully shielded. The small crocodile-like creature and the increasingly colorful flowers suggest the environment is alive with encouragement. Something instinctual, earthy, and slightly unusual is witnessing and supporting the crossing, while life itself becomes more vivid as Shaggy moves toward the light. This makes the passage feel less like a solitary achievement and more like a field of relational support. The sun is not just a source of light, but a welcoming presence. Its face gives the light a personal, relational quality, as if Shaggy is being received rather than merely illuminated. The bird above the sun adds another layer. It is the first time the bird participates in sunlight for its own delight, not as a witness to Shaggy, but as a being savoring its own joy. Symbolically, that matters because the world is no longer organized around Shaggy's crossing alone. Bird's independent enjoyment shows that light is becoming a shared condition, not a destination reserved for one character. In that sense, the spread carries the energy of integration, movement, release, and mutual flourishing all happening at once that is for everyone to experience. There are no chosen ones or special ones. This spread reveals that integrating our shadow with our light is the only true act of free will, awakened free will when it becomes choiceless. The next spread is entirely on white pages. On the left, Shaggy has come to a sudden halt, his arms caught mid-movement. His blue footprints and shadows stand in stark contrast to the white page. The text reads, "Oh!" Shaggy stood as if rooted to the spot, his eyes wide with shock. His friend's house had disappeared. Nothing was left. All that remained to show that someone had once been there was a large deep hole that split the ground like an open wound. The O letters appears in large navy letters, while Shaggy's mouth forms a rounded expression of surprise. On the other side of the spread, we see a large blue circle, shifting from lighter blue at the edges to darker blue at the center. Only Sparkle's watering can with the yellow flower have been left behind, as if escaping the blue hole. The white page creates a feeling of radical openness, but here, that openness is not yet freedom, it is absence. Shaggy's sudden stillness showed the body registering shock before the mind can fully process what has happened. The missing house suggests the collapse of a familiar container or psychic structure. What once gave form, shelter, and orientation has vanished, leaving behind a wound-shaped opening. Symbolically, this can be read as a moment of loss, disorientation, or initiation, where the ground of certainty gives way and something previously hidden is exposed. The blue circle deepening toward the center suggests a descent into interiority or depth. Blue here is not only color, but atmosphere, a place of feeling, memory, and the unknown. The fact that Sparkle's watering can remain outside the hole suggests that something essential has survived. Shaggy's sudden halt, the O and the rounded mouth are not just signs of surprise. They show the body registering rupture before the mind can name it. This spread is a threshold to true integration. It is disintegration, but not destruction. It is the dark night of the soul, or as I like to reframe it, the dark night with a K of the soul, and it asks us to have the courage to walk toward the blue portal. I love the little watering can left outside the portal. To me, it symbolizes our soul purpose, the capacity to nurture life with care, tenderness, and sustaining intention. It suggests that this gift remains with us even when familiar structure collapse, because it is an innate part of who we are. On the next spread, the text reads, Shaggy raced home as fast as he could, back into the heart of the darkness. Oh dear, he moaned. But when he reached his house, his mouth fell wide open in sheer amazement. It's you're here, he cried. To his great joy, he found Sparkle standing outside his front door. But then he saw that his friend was crying. What happened? This time, both pages of the spread are beautiful cyanotype, 3/4 filled with impressions of flowers. In the lower portion of the spread, we see 3 shaggies to depict movement, but this time he is running on all fours like a rabbit to move faster. He is worried, anxious, and afraid, and wants to get home as soon as possible. The pink in his cheeks and nose remain, but his expression shows tension. In the upper right corner of the page, we see Shaggy's little rectangular blue house with one window in light blue, as if lit from within, and a small blue chair sitting empty outside the door. Sparkle stands by the house, holding her flashlight. She is visible in white against navy, small but radiating light blue, while her flashlight emits a tiny yellow glow. She has rosy cheeks, but a very worried look on her face, and she is crying. She's wearing her silver belt and red shoes. It seems that the blue feather skirt and the striped colorful socks are no longer part of her accessories. This spread feels like fear in motion and a return to the threshold of relationship. Shaggy runs home in a rabbit-like way, which intensifies the nervous energy and sense of urgency. The cyanotype field matters symbolically because the cyanotype is a shadow print. It shows what is present through absence. That makes the page feel less like a stable scene and more like a psychic atmosphere in which memory, feeling, and urgency are being revealed. Shaggy's house becomes a small blue container of safety and orientation, while Sparkle standing outside it changes the emotional center of the spread. She's no longer in the open field of discovery. She is now at the doorway, waiting, vulnerable, and crying, which suggests that the return home is not a resolution, but an encounter with another layer of emotions. The missing accessories are also telling. Sparkle seems stripped down to the essentials, with the belt and red shoes still present, but the other decorative elements gone. Sparkle is no longer the playful guide. She's the emotional body stripped of adornment, standing at the threshold. Her tears are not weakness. They are the signal that the field is ready to release, but only if Shaggy stops running. Because home is not simply a place to return to, but a place where emotion must be faced. The joy of reunion is immediately complicated by grief, and that tension deepens the journey toward integration rather than closing it off. This is the moment of choice, the blue pill, the impulse to return to safety, which is really to remain in wounding, or the red pill, to face the raw presence of unresolved emotion and re-enter the pain. But it is the pain that reveals the truth. Shaggy's fear is not of the unknown, it is of the known pain that waits at the door. If he turns away now, he chooses the blue pill and avoids the truth that sets him free, the true free will. If he turns away, he chooses to remain in wounded. On the next spread, the text reads, "Something swallowed up my house. Suddenly everything went dark," sobbed Sparkle, and her bright coat grew darker with every tear. Shaggy held his friend very tightly. "That was how I felt too. I'm frightened. It is also strange," with Sparkle. "I know," said Shaggy. "There are lots of eyes to look at you, and claws to clutch at you, and toads to croak at you, but you will get used to them, and they won't hurt you. We're friends, and we'll get through this together." "Yes," sniffled Sparkle. She could not say any more. We now see a close-up of Shaggy and Sparkle huddled together, with Shaggy's hands resting on Sparkle's shoulders as he comforts her. Both have pink cheeks, and Shaggy has a pink nose, while Sparkle's hand rests on her heart, which also shows a touch of pink. In the background is Shaggy's blue house, with a door, a diamond-shaped window with dark blue inside, and a French window with white inside. The white chair sits turned away from the house, no longer inviting. On the left side of the roof is a chimney, and on the right, the bird is standing focused on itself. On the left page, there are cyanotype impressions of flowers and trees. The red umbrella is hooked onto the stem of a flower, and next to it is the frog, or rather a toad, as the text suggests, now without its vibrant green color, looking at them with a frown. The colorful bird has kept its colors and is perched on a larger flower stem, looking at them with compassion. The two crocodile-like creatures with red flowers are also looking at them with compassion, it seems. Two more toads and two baby toads are looking at them with the same frown of sadness as the one beside the umbrella. Looking closely at Shaggy's face, we see that he has a small smile. He's comforting, encouraging, and perhaps a sign that his coherence is emerging. This spread is about the move from fear into mutual holding. The huddle posture suggests that the earlier threshold experience has now become emotional reality, no longer merely crossing into the unknown, but feeling its weight together. The house in the background remains a symbol of shelter and orientation, but it is no longer the center of the scene. Instead, relationship becomes the true home of the spread. The turned away chair reinforces this shift. What was once an invitation to sit apart now feels inactive, as if the old posture of separation no longer serves. The bird tending to its own feathers suggests that self-care is not selfish, and it is the foundation of relational presence, nourishing ourselves while remaining in relationship, complementing each other, not completing each other. The cyanotype flowers and the various creatures create a field of emotional complexity. Some creatures appear aligned with compassion, while others carry sorrow or concern, suggesting that not all parts of the psyche respond to vulnerability in the same way. The frowning toads reflect sadness and our inner critics, part of us that still feel vulnerability, while the compassionate crocodile represent ancient protectors, now softened by emerging coherence. The red parasol hooked onto the flower stem feels like protection set down, no longer needed in the same way. Shaggy is still vulnerable, but he is no longer afraid to be seen. Shaggy's reassurance, both in words and gesture, and his small smile show coherence beginning to emerge, staying present with what hurts without the need to fix it or escape it. This is the aftermath of the collapse, big or small, but it is not regression. It is depth. Sparkle's coat has drawn darker with every tear. She's allowing her light to becoming richer, not thinner. This spread marks a subtle but profound movement towards integration. It symbolizes the emotional threshold of integration, where fear becomes intimacy and collapse becomes co-creation. Integrating all the parts, even the one that once seemed threatening, is the harmonic gathering I discussed in podcast number 4. This is the mutual holding phase. It's not the end of the journey, it is the beginning of embodied coherence. On the next spread, the text reads, "Gradually, she got used to the gloomy darkness, and soon she didn't even need her flashlight. The friends play hide and seek or tag with the croaking toads and the owner of the eyes and claws. The toads and claw creatures were really quite harmless." This spread differs from the previous one, even though it is still entirely in darkness or in cyanotype. We see Sparkle on the left and Shaggy on the right playing hide and seek with the colorful bird, the crocodile-like creatures, the toads, and the white bird. Shaggy and Sparkle are smiling, the energy is playful, and the etymological sense of play as something resounding and radiant is palpable. Shaggy has placed his yellow boots near the flowers to trick Sparkle, while he hides further away, covering his face with his hands. Sparkle, radiating in a bubble of light blue, is happily searching for him. The beauty of the cyanotype impressions is fully revealed here. This spread marks a deep shift from fear into familiarity. What was once experienced as threatening is now becoming known, and what is known is no longer frightening. The darkness is not conquered, it is inhabited, and in being inhabited, it becomes a place of relationship and play. Hide and seek is especially symbolic because it suggests that presence and absence are being practiced in a safe way. The children are learning that something can disappear without being lost, and that returning is part of the rhythm of connection. This is a mature form of trust. The creatures once perceived as dangerous are now revealed as harmless companions. This shows the movement from projection to recognition. The unknown is no longer filled with fantasy or fear, but with actual presence. In that sense, the psyche is learning to distinguish threat from strangeness. The cyanotype field matters here because it turns the dark into a living visual language. Anna Atkins pioneered the cyanotype process in botanical imaging by pressing botanical forms onto chemically treated paper and exposing them to light. Where the plant lay, the paper remained white. Where it was exposed, the paper turned blue. In that sense, the image reveals light through contrast, allowing what is hidden to emerge. Shaggy and Sparkle are doing something similar. They are pressing their presence, attention, and coherence into the darkness rather than avoiding it. They enter the blue, and through that contact, the light is revealed. Like Anna Atkins, they are transforming their inner landscape into a symbolic field that speaks through image, color, and resonance. This is the alchemical inversion of perception. What was once opaque becomes translucent. What was once threatening becomes intimate. What was once empty becomes full of presence. They are not just facing their shadows, they are playing with them. They are not just surviving their past, they are transfiguring it through creative presence. They are not just healing, they are starting to re-enchant their own story. To me, this is soul work as visual alchemy. I'm not just telling my story, I'm showing its imprint. And often, the ghost image of that imprint is more beautiful than the original. The ghost image represents the re-enchantment, the shift in perception, where the world is no longer random or empty, but begins to feel live and responsive. On the next spread, the text read, "One day, Shaggy said to Sparkle, 'Today, we'll go back to the gray blue band.' 'Really?' said Sparkle hesitantly. 'Really,' said Shaggy with a smile. Hand in hand, they set off. For a long time, they stood looking across at the colors. Then they went back into the darkness. We see Shaggy and Sparkle sitting in the now familiar and comfortable cyanotype world, surrounded by flowers and creatures. Sparkle is holding a blue flower, and Shaggy has placed his hand on her shoulder, comforting and encouraging her without pressuring her. He gives her the space and time to take an inspired action, not from him, but from herself. They're looking at the color world, where we see Sparkle's house in red, orange, and yellow, and the yellow tree with red flowers, both casting a small blue shadow. They're looking at it as we might look at a sunrise or a sunset. The white bird is looking as well. Shaggy and Sparkle's coats are nearly the same color, a beautiful mix of different shades of blue and white. The top of Sparkle's tail is red, matching her red shoes. This spread holds the paradox of comfort and return. The cyanotype world is safe, beautiful, and deeply alluring, a place of belonging that is hard to leave. Yet it is also the world of wounding, where what has been eaten can be seen and felt. That is what makes it powerful. It does not ask them to escape the darkness, but to learn how to inhabit it consciously. The gesture of looking across at the color world feels like standing at the edge of memory, desire, or possibility, a moment of reverence, beauty, and threshold. The colored world is not rejected, it is honored. But they do not remain there. They choose to return, which suggests a willingness to re-enter the unresolved and continue the work of integration. Shaggy's hand on Sparkle's shoulder is especially important. He's not leading, pushing, or rescuing her. He's accompanying her, leaving space for her own inspired action. That makes the scene feel collaborative, as though movement is being co-created rather than imposed. The near matching codes suggest attunement and shared coherence. They're distinct but deeply aligned. Sparkle's red tail and red shoes echo the colored world she's gazing toward, while the small blue shadow under the bright house and tree suggests that even the world of color carries its own shadow. Nothing is purely one thing anymore. These spreads point to a core tension, the comfort of the wound and the choice to return to the darkness not as an escape, but as a conscious integration. What is wounding? It is a state of being in which unresolved memories, patterns, or emotional contractions become so familiar that they feel like our baseline. It can feel safe or even alluring, but it keeps us in a loop, preventing us from fully embodying our coherence and moving into inspired action. True growth does not require escape, but conscious re-entry into the wound, not to relieve it, but to stabilize and integrate its energy and then choose to step forward into inspired action. While wounding is a space we're called to leave, as we're meant to step off the boat as embodied co-creators and walk toward the other shore, unconscious wounding is still closer to conscious wounding and to integration than to complete unawareness of our wounds. On the next spread, the text reads, "One day, and only for a moment, Sparkle dared to go back into the light again with Shaggy. They took a parasol, of course. Shaggy held Sparkle's hand and said, 'Don't be afraid, I'm here with you.' Sparkle was not at all afraid because she had her friends beside her. All the same, she was excited and wagged her little tail. The page is cyanotype on the left, gradually transitioning to white on the right side. We see Sparkle on the left, looking up at Shaggy, who is smiling at her and holding the red parasol above them. Sparkle rests her hand on her heart, as if expressing both gratitude toward Shaggy and excitement. Shaggy's attention is on Sparkle, yet he remains grounded and joyful. On the next page, the text reads, "Let's do this every day now," said Shaggy. "Oh yes," said Sparkle happily, and from that moment on, bright spots begin to appear on the darkened coat. We see familiar things like Sparkle's house, the sun, and the yellow tree with red flowers, but also a greenhouse. In the center of the page, we see 3 adult gardeners planting, caring for, and admiring colorful flowers: red, yellow, orange, and green, in a blue patch. There's also a child in blue overalls waving happily. Blue is more present than before. The spread marks the beginning of embodied return, not as a sudden leap, but as a gentle relational unfolding. Sparkle does not abandon the light, she enters it for a moment, and that moment is enough to begin a new pattern. The parasol suggests that contact with the light can be mediated, safe, and bearable. Shaggy's hand in Sparkle's and his calm reassurance show that courage is now relational. The movement into light is no longer an individual trial, but a shared act of trust. Sparkle's hand on her heart, her excitement, and wagging tail show that the body recognizes what is happening as good. The bright spots beginning to appear on the darkened coat symbolize that integration does not erase shadow, but allows light to emerge within it. The coat becomes a living field of contrast, no longer split between dark and light, but enlivened by both. The familiar objects returning in new forms, the houses, the sun, the garden, the child, show that the world is becoming more populated, more relational, and more alive. Blue is still present, but it is no longer isolated or dominant. It now participates in a wider field of color, suggesting that the psyche is no longer trapped in one state, but becoming more spacious and coherent. The return is not rushed, it is patient. The word patience comes from the Latin pati, meaning to suffer or to endure. But in its spiritual sense, it is not passive. It is the sacred capacity to remain present with what is, without needing to change it. Light does not demand immediate transformation, it invites consistent presence. The bright spots appear not from force, but from daily, gentle re-engagement. Patience is the sacred rhythm of integration, allowing light to emerge within shadow, one moment at a time. Integration of conscious wounding is embodying the patience of light. On the final spread, the text reads, "After a few visits, the 2 friends built a new house in the place of shining colors. But they also kept their other house back in the darkness. They were not at all afraid of the dark. They both agreed that there was nothing better in the whole world than to have a friend who understood the need for a parasol and a flashlight." We return to cyanotype, dark navy blue on the left, and a white background on the right. Yet, this is the only sameness shared with the first spread. The division between dark blue and white is no longer as controlled as it was at the beginning. Here, the blue spills onto the white background, and we see blue footprints between Shaggy's old house and the new house in the place of shining colors. The blue world around Shaggy's house feels inviting, and the house itself is almost a character of its own, as if saying, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, I am the witness and the root of the new house. A yellow curtain with a red tie has been added to the door, making it feel like a place of welcome, retreat, and passage, a place where new wounding arising can be visited, not in fear, but to reach truth and new awareness. The window shows light inside, and the chimney is now rendered in white impression. Potted flowers stand on either side of the house, and Sparkle's little watering can with the yellow flower is there as well. The red parasol is closed and leans against the house, ready if needed, but no longer as a tool, but as a sign of trust. The white bird and the colorful bird are both flying above the house, going from dark towards the light. The colorful bird leading the way in joy, mirroring Shaggy and Sparkle, and like them, complementing each other and not completing each other. This is what harmony looks like. On the right page, the scene becomes an explosion of joy and calm, blue and yellow, order and chaos, grounding and elevation. It is a visual representation of paradox and of the final stage of integration. The new house Shaggy and Sparkle built feels almost like a tree house. In fact, we do not see a fixed structure, so much as we see them resting among large tree flowers, primarily yellow with shades of red. They rest on a blue foundation, a blue trunk, or perhaps shadow, water, or feeling, or all of them. The white chair has been moved there, turned outward as if to invite new feelings. And next to it are a yellow teapot and two cups, one green and one red. Sparkle's silver belt hangs in the tree from a hanger above the teapot. On the other side of the blue shadow pool rests Shaggy's yellow boots and Sparkle's little red shoes, placed side by side next to the ladder used to climb the treehouse. The treehouse quality of the new dwelling suggests that the structure is, yes, new, but also alive, organic, and elevated, but still rooted in shadow, water, and feelings. This is not a house built to deny the dark, it is built above and through it. The blue foundation makes that clear. What once felt like hurt becomes the ground that supports a new form of life. The blue footprints across the white field show that the path between worlds remains active. Integration is not a destination. It is a dance of conscious movement between light and dark, a way of moving back and forth with awareness, companionship, and choiceless choice. The fact that blue now spills onto white suggests that the boundary has softened. The dark is no longer sealed off, and the light is no longer pristine or separate. They're interwoven. The final spread is a visual embodiment of what Eckhart Tolle calls the new earth, a place where consciousness has stabilized in non-resistance, presence, and unity. It is symbolized by, number one, a reflection of the cyanotype inversion. What was once the background, dark blue, is now the root and the foundation. Number two, the symbolic continuity between dark and light. We don't erase the past, we redefine it from burden to root, witness, or teacher. Then we can re-enchant it, our past, by infusing the world with sacred meaning, wonder, and symbolic depth. And finally, number three, the visual embodiment of the new earth is symbolized by the paradoxal harmony or the living paradox, light and dark, joy and calm, blue and yellow, order and chaos, grounding and elevation. We have gone deep once again. Let's now trace Shaggy and Sparkle's journey through the 5 stages of shadow integration, viewed through Carl Jung's larger process of individuation. Individuation is the lifelong process of becoming differentiated from the collective unconscious while developing a unique, coherent sense of self. It is a movement towards psychic wholeness, not the elimination of our darkness, but a conscious relationship with every part of who we are. The 5 stages are recognition, acceptance, relation, dialogue, integration, transformation, and transcendence. So number 1, recognition. Recognition begins when we become aware of the shadow, the unconscious, hidden, or rejected parts of ourselves. At the beginning of Shaggy and Sparkle's story, darkness and light exist as separate worlds. They sense their difference before they can understand it. Across spread 1 through 4, curiosity awakens. Curiosity becomes courageous action as they decide to take a quick look, but then they ask, "Who are you?" Fear arises and they run away. This is the first encounter with the shadow, fascination, uncertainty, and the instinct to retreat from what feels unfamiliar. Number 2 is acceptance. Acceptance means acknowledging the shadow without judging, suppressing, or trying to escape it. In spreads 5 and 6, Shaggy and Sparkle begin to remain with the darkness rather than fleeing from it. Dialogue is initiated, and they come closer than they ever have before. The darkness is no longer simply an enemy, it becomes part of their shared journey. Acceptance does not mean that fear disappears. It means we make room for fear and allow it to be present without letting it determine every next step. Number 3 is relation and dialogue. Relation and dialogue ask us to engage the shadow, to listen to its wisdom, understand its purpose, and build a relationship with what once felt threatening. Shaggy and Sparkle meet one another across the threshold. In spread 7, Shaggy ventures toward the light, and a true relationship begins. In spread 8, Shaggy moves into the light independently, jumping with joy. What was one separation becomes connection. The unknown begins to reveal itself, not as a threat, but as an essential part of the self. Number 4 is integration and transformation. Integration means incorporating the shadow into conscious life, not erasing it, but re-owning its energy. Shaggy and Sparkle's shared darkness become a space of play, color, creativity, and life. What was feared becomes beautiful. In spread 9, Sparkle's house and Sparkle's herself seem to disappear, replaced by a blue portal. In spread 10, Shaggy races home and finds Sparkle standing outside his house, afraid. In spread 11, they remain together in the dark, keeping company to fear and to the wound. Spread 12 is what I call the re-enchantment of the shadow, the moment when darkness is no longer reduced to pain, but is recognized as a source of imagination, vitality, and transformation. Spread 13 marks the decision to step out of wounding and into a new way of being. And number 5 is transcendence. Transcendence moves beyond the split between light and dark into a unified sense of self. This is the movement toward individuation, wholeness that includes rather than excludes. Shaggy and Sparkle end in a shared world where both the dark house and the bright house remain. Wholeness does not require one world to defeat the other. It asks that both be honored. In spread 14, they walk step by step toward the light together, sheltered by the parasol. This is a daily practice, choosing connection, moving gently, and noticing the bright spots that begin to appear on Sparkle's coat. In spread 15, after integration, is the harmonic gathering. Shaggy and Sparkle are now embodied co-creators. For me, transcendence is Eckhart Tolle's new earth state of being, a remembering of who we truly are. Yet, remembering who we are can sound abstract. This is why I love connecting this journey to my 12 soul suit archetypal wheel. It helps me recognize how I'm living in wounding and shows me a path toward integration and transcendence through re-enchantment. By identifying our archetypes, learning their symbolic language, and coming into relationship with them, we can harness their power in light. We begin to see and feel them as what they truly are, vessels of our highest potential for coherence. In transcendence, we become through the body full embodied co-creators, and gratitude is our energetic signature. And on the topic of gratitude, I invite you to listen to episode number 5. And now onto our home bliss practices. Today, I am offering 3 home bliss practices that are connected and that I call re-enchantment tools. They are powerful ways to identify and release the subtle patterns through which language reinforces wounding. In particular, these tools help us notice the language of entitlement that can arise from the common belief that because of our past pain, we are owed something or deserve special consideration. Recognizing our wounding is essential if we are to move toward transcendence or the new earth state. We cannot transform what we have not first learned to see. The re-enchantment tool number 1 is to notice and observe wounding language in our outer world. This is achieved through detachment, becoming a compassionate observer of our outer environment. We notice the language, symbols, messages, and stories around us that normalize wounding and keep us identified with it in everyday life. While working on this podcast, I began noticing examples everywhere. I saw a bumper sticker that read, "Let me merge, my dad died." In a television scene, a group of people complain to a restaurant manager because their food is taking too long to arrive. The manager points to their waiter and explains that he has just lost his father. We then see the waiter carrying their food, only to be stopped at another table by someone offering condolences. These examples do not deny that grief and pain are real. Rather, they invite us to notice when pain becomes an identity, a social currency, or an unconscious demand that we carry and ask others to carry for us. Very often it is from a wounded place that we expect special treatment. We can also observe the wider messages of fear, self-preservation, and the illusion of empowerment that surround us. Advertisements, billboards, public announcements, and messages over microphones in public places such as airports and train stations. We're told to report suspicious behavior, we're praised for staying away from drugs, or we are congratulated for saving money when we spend money. Once we begin noticing the evidence of wounding around us, it can seem endless. But do not let that discourage you. Remember, the truth sets us free. This awareness brings us one step closer to our truth and one step further away from our own wounding. The re-enchantment tool number 2 is to be the observer of our own language of wounding and entitlement. This also requires detachment. This time, we become compassionate observers of our own inner world. When we feel hurt, wronged, or overlooked, we can listen without judgment to the words arising in our inner dialogue. Let's pay particular attention to phrases such as, "I deserve better," "After all I've done," "Why me?" "It's not fair," "They should have," "I'm entitled to," "I will never put myself in that position again," etc. Simply notice these phrases. Do not try to change them yet. Entitlement can often keep us trapped in the victim archetype, even when we believe we're reclaiming our power. To truly claim our power, we first need to move out of the wounding. I think of my victim archetype as the baby encased in dough asking, "Why me? It's not fair. Why would you do that to me?" Yet by remaining inside that dough, it remained in wounding, in this case, in victimhood. There needs to be a jarring movement, the moment when we realize that we have the power to stand up and claim our power. This is not easy. It requires courage, self-compassion, and self-forgiveness, but we have to start somewhere, and the re-enchantment tools are one way. The third re-enchantment tool is to delay our reactions by first noticing our reaction when they arise from wounding, specifically the language we use, and little by little delay our response. We begin with 1 second, then 2, 3, or 10 seconds, eventually practice extending that pauses into minutes. The intention is to create space between the trigger and the reaction, allowing us to replace reactive language and actions rooted in wounding with curiosity, one powerful quality of our child archetype in light. Instead of immediately reacting, we might ask, what am I going to learn about myself through this? And remember, curiosity is the first feeling that precedes inspired action for both Shaggy and Sparkle. The practice is not about forcing ourselves to be positive or denying our feelings. At first, it is simply about delaying reactive language and action rooted in wounding for as long as possible until we're no longer responding from the wound, but from a more conscious and empowered place. The word enchantment comes from the Latin incantare, meaning to sing into or to charm. It is rooted in the idea of using sound, voice, or song to influence or captivate, to cast a spell through vocal resonance. In ancient traditions, enchantment was often linked to magic, charms as vocal spells intended to attract or influence, and melody as the power of music to move the soul. With these re-enchantment tools, we are jump-starting the retuning of our field through resonance. Like working with ghost prints in printmaking, we take the residue of memory and give it a new life, not by erasing the past, but by reprinting it with a new resonance and allowing the ethereal image to become the most meaningful one. In re-enchantment, the ghost print is the field memory that remains after distortion is removed. It is the subtle pattern that emerges when we allow coherence to reveal itself. So again, When we recognize the shadow of entitlement in our own language, we can begin to shift out the victim archetype by releasing the need to deserve. We reclaim sovereign power through conscious choice and self-responsibility. And on that note, thank you so much for listening. To express my gratitude for the authors of this amazing book, originally written in German, Danke. Danke comes from the verb danken, to thank, but its deeper root is closely connected to thinking, remembering, and holding someone in grateful thought. In this way, Danke becomes a form of conscious remembering. So, dear listeners, Danke, I'm holding you in loving thought. If you like this episode, like and subscribe. If you want to see a video of this podcast, head out to my YouTube channel at YouTube at The Spiritual Language Teacher. And please like, subscribe, and don't hesitate to comment. If you have further comments, questions, you can also reach me via Instagram at The Spiritual Language Teacher or by email at thespirituallanguageteacher@gmail.com. So thank you. Merci. Ta. Spasiba. Kosonom. Sadu. Gracias. And danke. And as always, remember to breathe.